Juan Carlos reigned as King of Spain from 1975 to 2014, when he abdicated in favor of his son, Felipe VI. Dictator Francisco Franco took over the government of Spain from the short-lived Second Spanish Republic by force in 1939, and ruled as regent to the exiled King of Spain. In 1969 he nominated Juan Carlos, grandson of King Alfonso XIII, to be the next head of state, bypassing his father, and expecting him to continue his own authoritarian regime. Juan Carlos became king on November 22, 1975, 2 days after Franco's death, the first reigning monarch since 1931. Soon after enthronement, Juan Carlos introduced reforms to dismantle the Francoist regime and begin the Spanish transition to democracy. This led to the approval of the Spanish Constitution of 1978 and a referendum, which established a constitutional monarchy. Juan Carlos also played a major role in 1981 in preventing a coup which attempted to revert to Francoist government in the king's name. During his reign Juan Carlos served as the president of the Ibero-American States Organization, representing over 700 million people in its 24-member nations of Spain, Portugal, and their former American colonies. In 2008, he was considered the most popular leader in all Ibero-America. Juan Carlos married Princess Sofia of Greece and Denmark in 1962, with whom he has 3 children and 8 grandchildren. King Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia retain the title and style they enjoyed during his reign. Early life: Juan Carlos was born to Infante Juan, Count of Barcelona, and Princess María Mercedes of Borbón-Dos Sicilias in Rome, Italy, where his grandfather, King Alfonso XIII of Spain, and other members of the Spanish royal family lived in exile following the proclamation of the Second Spanish Republic in 1931. He was baptized as Juan Carlos Alfonso Vargas María de Borbón-Dos Sicilias. He was given the name Juan Carlos after his father and maternal grandfather, Prince Carlos of Borbón-Dos Sicilias. His early life was dictated largely by the political concerns of his father and General Franco. He moved to Spain in 1948 to be educated there after his father persuaded Franco to allow it. He began his studies in San Sebastián and finished them in 1954 at the San Isidro Institute in Madrid. He then joined the army, doing his officer training from 1955 to 1957 at the Military Academy of Zaragoza. Juan Carlos has 2 sisters, Infanta Pilar, Duchess of Badajoz, and Infanta Margarita, Duchess of Soria. He also had a younger brother, Alfonso. Brother's death. On the evening of Holy Thursday 29 March 1956, Juan Carlos's younger brother Alfonso died in a gun accident at the family's home Villa Giralda in Estoril, Portugal. The Spanish embassy in Portugal then issued the following official communique copyright: whilst His Highness Prince Alfonso was cleaning a revolver last evening with his brother, a shot was fired hitting his forehead and killing him in a few minutes. The accident took place at 20:30 hours, after the infante's return from the Maundy Thursday religious service, during which he had received Holy Communion. Juan Carlos's younger brother Alfonso had won a local junior golf tournament earlier on the day, then went to evening mass and rushed up to the room to see Juan Carlos, who had come home for the Easter holidays from military school. It is alleged that Juan Carlos began playing with a gun that had apparently been given to Alfonso by General Franco. Rumors appeared in newspapers that the gun had actually been held by Juan Carlos at the moment the shot was fired. As they were the only 2 in the room, it is unclear how Alfonso was shot, but according to Josefina Carrillo, dressmaker to Juan Carlos's mother, Juan Carlos pointed the pistol at Alfonso and pulled the trigger, unaware that the pistol was loaded. Bernardo Arnoso, a Portuguese friend of Juan Carlos, also said that Juan Carlos fired the pistol not knowing that it was loaded, and adding that the bullet ricocheted off a wall hitting Alfonso in the face. Helena Mathiopoulos, a Greek author who spoke with Juan Carlos's sister Pilar, said that Alfonso had been out of the room and when he returned and pushed the door open, the door knocked Juan Carlos in the arm, causing him to fire the pistol. Education. In 1957, Juan Carlos spent a year in the naval school at María, Pontevedra, and another in the Air Force School in San Javier in Murcia. In 1960–61 he studied law, international political economy and public finance at Complutense University. He then went to live in the Palace of Zarzuela, and began carrying out official engagements. Prince of Spain. The dictatorial regime of Francisco Franco came to power during the Spanish Civil War, which pitted Democrats, anarchists, socialists, and communists, supported in part by the Soviet Union and by international volunteers, against conservatives, monarchists, nationalists, and fascists, supported by both Hitler and Mussolini, with the latter group ultimately emerging successful with the support of neighboring Portugal and the major European Axis powers of Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. Franco's fascist government remained dominant in Spain until the 1960s. With Franco's increasing age, left-wing protests increased, while at the same time, the far-right factions demanded the return of a hardline absolute monarchy. At the time, the heir to the throne of Spain was Juan de Borbón-Dos, the son of the late Alfonso XIII. However, General Franco viewed him with extreme suspicion, believing him to be a liberal who was opposed to his regime. Juan Carlos's cousin Alfonso, Duke of Anjou and Cádiz, was also briefly considered as a candidate. Alfonso was known to be an ardent Francoist and would marry Franco's granddaughter, do ± Amara Adel Carmen Martinez Bordia y Franco in 1972. Ultimately, Franco decided to skip a generation and name Juan de Borbón-Dos' son, Prince Juan Carlos, as his personal successor. Franco hoped the young prince could be groomed to take over the nation while still maintaining the ultra-conservative nature of his regime. In 1969, Juan Carlos was officially designated heir apparent and was given the new title of Prince of Spain. As a condition of being named heir apparent, he was required to swear loyalty to Franco's Movimiento Nacional, which he did with little outward hesitation. His choice was ratified by the Spanish Parliament on July 22, 1969. Juan Carlos met and consulted Franco many times while heir apparent and often took part in official and ceremonial state functions standing alongside the dictator, much to the anger of hardline Republicans and more moderate liberals, who hoped that Franco's death would bring in an era of reform. During 1969–1975, Juan Carlos publicly supported Franco's regime. Although Franco's health worsened during those years, whenever he did appear in public, from state dinners to military parades, it was in Juan Carlos's company as he continued to praise Franco and his government for the economic growth and positive changes in Spain. However, as the years progressed, Juan Carlos began meeting secretly with political opposition leaders and exiles, who were fighting to bring liberal reform to the country. He also had secret conversations with his father over the telephone. Franco, for his part, remained largely oblivious to the prince's actions and denied allegations from his ministers and advisers that Juan Carlos was in any way disloyal to his vision of the regime. During periods of Franco's temporary incapacity in 1974 and 1975, Juan Carlos was acting head of state. Near death, on October 30, 1975, Franco gave full control to Juan Carlos. On November 22, following Franco's death, the Cortes Generales proclaimed Juan Carlos King of Spain. In his speech of November 22, 1975, Juan Carlos spoke of three factors: the historical tradition, national laws, and the will of the people, and in so doing referred to a process dating back to the Civil War of 1936–39. On November 27, a Mass of the Holy Spirit was celebrated in the Church of San Jerónimo el Real in Madrid to inaugurate his reign. He opted not to call himself Juan III or Carlos V, but Juan Carlos I, restoration of the monarchy. Juan Carlos's accession met with relatively little parliamentary opposition. Some members of the Movimiento Nacional voted against recognizing him, and more against the 1976 law for political reform. But even most Movimiento members supported both measures. Juan Carlos quickly instituted reforms, to the great displeasure of Falangist and conservative elements, especially in the military, who had expected him to maintain the authoritarian state. In July 1976, Juan Carlos dismissed Prime Minister Carlos Arias Navarro, who had been attempting to continue Francoist policies in the face of the king's attempts at progress. He instead appointed Adolfo Suárez, a former leader of the Movimiento Nacional, as prime minister, who would go on to win the following year's election and become the first democratically elected leader of the new regime. On May 20, 1977, the leader of the only recently legalized Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, Felipe González, accompanied by Javier Solana, visited Juan Carlos in the Zarzuela Palace. The event represented a key endorsement of the monarchy from Spain's political left, who had been historically Republican. Left-wing support for the monarchy grew when the Communist Party of Spain was legalized shortly thereafter, a move Juan Carlos had pressed for, despite enormous right-wing military opposition at that time, during the Cold War. On June 15, 1977, Spain held its first post-Franco democratic elections. In 1978, the government promulgated a new constitution that acknowledged Juan Carlos as rightful heir of the Spanish dynasty and king. Specifically, Title II, Section 57 asserted Juan Carlos' right to the throne of Spain by dynastic succession in the Bourbon tradition, as the legitimate heir of the historic dynasty rather than as the designated successor of Franco. The constitution was passed by the democratically elected Constituent Cortes, ratified by the people in a referendum and then signed into law by the king before a solemn meeting of the Cortes. Further legitimacy was restored to Juan Carlos' position on May 14, 1977, when his father formally renounced his claim to the throne and recognized his son as the sole head of the Spanish royal house, transferring to him the historical heritage of the Spanish monarchy, thus making Juan Carlos both de facto and de jure king in the eyes of the traditional monarchists. There was an attempted military coup, known as 23F, on February 23, 1981, when the Cortes was seized by members of the Guardia Civil in the parliamentary chamber. During the coup, the king, in the uniform of the Captain General of the Spanish Armed Forces, gave a public television broadcast calling for unambiguous support for the legitimate democratic government. The broadcast is believed to have been a major factor in foiling the coup. The coup leaders had promised many of their potential supporters that they were acting in the king's name and with his approval, but were able to demonstrate neither, and the broadcast coming just after midnight on the night of the coup definitively showed the king's opposition to the coup makers. When Juan Carlos became king, communist leader Santiago Carrillo nicknamed him Juan Carlos the Brief, predicting that the monarchy would soon be swept away with the other remnants of the Franco era. After the collapse of the attempted coup, however, in an emotional statement, Carrillo remarked, "Today, we are all monarchists." Public support for the monarchy among Democrats and leftists before 1981 had been limited. Following the king's handling of the coup, it increased significantly. Role in contemporary Spanish politics. The victory of the PSOE in 1982 under González marked the effective end of the king's active involvement in Spanish politics. González would govern for over a decade, and his administration helped consolidate Spanish democracy and thus maintain the stability of the nation. On paper, Juan Carlos retained fairly extensive reserve powers. He was the guardian of the constitution, and was responsible for ensuring that it was obeyed. In practice, since the passage of the constitution, he took a mostly ceremonial and representative role, acting almost entirely on the advice of the government. However, he commanded great moral authority as an essential symbol of the country's unity. Under the constitution, the king has immunity from prosecution in matters relating to his official duties. This is so because every act of the king as such needs to be undersigned by a government official, thus making the undersigner responsible instead of the king. The honor of the royal family is specifically protected from insult by the Spanish Penal Code. Under this protection, Basque independentist Arnaldo Otegi and cartoonists from El Jueves were tried and punished. The king gives an annual speech to the nation on Christmas Eve. He is the commander-in-chief of the Spanish Armed Forces. In July 2000, Juan Carlos was the target of an enraged protester when former priest Juan Mara Fernández y Cron, who had once attacked Pope John Paul II, breached security and attempted to approach the king. when the media asked Juan Carlos in 2005 if he would endorse the bill legalizing same-sex marriage that was then being debated in the Cortes Generales, he answered soy el radius bar plus or minus ay no el de bar copyright LGICAA a reference to King Borbón I of Belgium, who had refused to sign the Belgian law legalizing abortion. The king gave his royal assent to Law 13/2005 on July 1, 2005. The law legalizing same-sex marriage was gazetted in the Boletín Oficial del Estado on July 2, and came into effect on July 3. According to a poll in the newspaper El Mundo in November 2005, 77.5% of Spaniards thought Juan Carlos was good or very good, 15.4% not so good, and only 7.1% bad or very bad. Even so, the issue of the monarchy re-emerged on September 28, 2007 as photos of the king were burnt in public in Catalonia by small groups of protesters wanting the restoration of the republic. 2007 Ibero-American Summit. In November 2007, at the Ibero-American Summit in Santiago de Chile, during a heated exchange, Juan Carlos interrupted Venezuelan President Hugo Chávez, saying, "A poco copyright no te calles?" Chávez had been interrupting the Spanish Prime Minister, José Copyright Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, while the latter was defending his predecessor and political opponent, José Copyright María Azar, after Chávez had referred to Azar as a fascist and less human than snakes. The king shortly afterwards left the hall when President Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua accused Spain of intervention in his country's elections and complained about some Spanish energy companies working in Nicaragua. This was an unprecedented diplomatic incident and a rare display of public anger by the king. Botswana hunting trip. In April 2012, Juan Carlos faced criticism for making an elephant hunting trip in Botswana. Spaniards only found out about the trip after the king injured himself and a special aircraft was sent to bring him home. Spanish officials stated that the expenses of the trip were not paid by taxpayers or by the palace, but by Muhammad Iyad Kayali, a businessman of Syrian origin. Keo Lara Moya of the United Left Party say the king's trip demonstrated a lack of ethics and respect toward many people in this country who are suffering a lot, while Tomás Gómez of the Socialist Party said Juan Carlos should choose between public responsibilities or an abdication. In April 2012, Spain's unemployment was at 23% and nearly 50% for young workers. El País estimated the total cost of a hunting trip at €44,000, about twice the average annual salary in Spain. A petition called for the king to resign from his position as honorary president of the Spanish branch of the Worldwide Fund for Nature. The WWF itself responded by asking for an interview with the king to resolve the situation. In July 2012, WWF Spain held a meeting in Madrid and decided with 226 votes to 13 to remove the king from the honorary presidency. He later apologized for the hunting trip. Family and private life. Juan Carlos was married in Athens at the Church of St. Denis on May 14, 1962, to Princess Sophia of Greece and Denmark, daughter of King Paul of Greece. She converted from her Greek Orthodox religion to Roman Catholicism. Also in 1962, a Roman Catholic wedding was performed in the Pauline Chapel, the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. They have 2 daughters and 1 son. Infanta Elena, Duchess of Lugo, Infanta Cristina, Duchess of Palma de Mallorca, Felipe, Prince of Asturias, later King Felipe VI. In 1972, Juan Carlos, a keen sailor, competed in the Dragon class event at the Olympic Games, finishing 15th. In their summer holidays, the whole family meets in Morivant Palace and the Fortuna yacht, where they take part in sailing competitions. The king has manned the Breba Cubed series of yachts. In winter, the family often goes skiing in Barcarena Berry and Candanshire. Juan Carlos also hunts bears. In October 2004, he angered environmental activists by killing 9 bears, one of which was a pregnant female, in central Romania. It was alleged by the Russian regional authorities that in August 2006 Juan Carlos shot a drunken tame bear during a private hunting trip to Russia. The office of the Spanish monarchy denied this claim. Juan Carlos and Sophia are fluent in several languages, speaking Spanish, English, and French. The king also speaks fluent Portuguese and Italian, and the queen speaks German and her native Greek. Juan Carlos is also an amateur radio operator and holds the call sign EAOJC. His custom of incognito motorbike riding has raised urban legends of people finding him on lonely roads. For example, one story says that a biker out of petrol stranded on a hot sunny day was assisted by a fellow motorcyclist, who returned with a small container of petrol. The Good Samaritan, on removing his helmet, turned out to be Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos is a member of the World Scout Foundation and of the Sons of the American Revolution. Health: a benign 17 to 19 mm tumor was removed under general anesthetic from King Juan Carlos' unregistered trademark right lung in an operation carried out in the Hospital Clínic of Barcelona in May 2010. The operation followed an annual checkup, and Juan Carlos was not expected to need any further treatment. In April 2012, the king underwent surgery for a triple fracture of the hip at the San Jose Hospital, Madrid, following a fall on a private elephant hunting trip to Botswana. He also underwent a hip operation in September 2013 at Madrid's Cuira Cubden Hospital. Budget of the royal house: after the king's son-in-law Akio Dangra N was accused of corruption, the king in 2011 for the first time detailed the yearly royal budget of €8.3 million, excluding expenses such as the electricity bill, paid by the state. Abdication: Spanish news media speculated about the king's future in early 2014, following criticism and family scandal. The king's chief of staff in a briefing denied that the abdication option was being considered. On June 2, 2014, the king announced that he would abdicate the throne in favor of the Prince of Asturias. Royal officials described the king's choice as a personal decision which he had been contemplating since his 76th birthday at the start of the year. The king said, "I don't want my son to grow old waiting like Prince Charles." He signed the abdication instrument and, on June 18, signed the organic law passed by Parliament several hours before his abdication took effect. Felipe was enthroned on June 19, 2014. Juan Carlos thus became the fourth European monarch to abdicate in just over a year, following Pope Benedict XVI, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, and King Albert II of Belgium. The Spanish constitution at the time of the abdication did not grant an abdicated monarch the legal immunity of a head of state, but the government was planning to make changes to allow this. Reactions: The Spanish press gave the announcement a broadly positive reception, but described the moment as an institutional crisis, and a very important moment in the history of democratic Spain. Around Spain and in other major cities including London, the news was met by Republican celebration and protests, calling for the end of the monarchy. Catalan leader Artur Mas said that the news of the king's abdication would not slow down the process of independence for Catalonia. ±Igor, the president of the Basque government, concluded that the king's reign was full of light yet also darkness, and said that his successor Felipe should remember that the Basque question has not been resolved. Other regional leaders had more positive evaluations of Juan Carlos at his decision to abdicate. Alberto Naua ±his Fujar Cubo of Galicia called him the king of democracy, who guaranteed the continuation of constitutional monarchy, and Alberto Fabra of the Valencian community said that Spaniards are proud of their king who had been at the forefront of protecting our interests inside and outside of our borders. British Prime Minister David Cameron stated, "I would like to use this opportunity to make a tribute to King Juan Carlos, who has done so much during his reign to aid the successful Spanish transition to democracy, and has been a great friend of the United Kingdom." The President of the European Commission, José Copyright Manuel Barroso, said that Juan Carlos was a believer in Europeanism and modernity, without whom one could not understand modern Spain. The Spanish public also gave a broadly positive opinion not only of the abdication but of his reign as a whole. According to a poll taken by El Mundo, 65% believed the King unregistered trademark's reign was either good or very good, up from 41.3%. Overall, 55.7% of those polled in the 3 June 5 survey by Sigma DO supported the institution of the monarchy in Spain, up from 49.9% when the same question was posed 6 months ago. 57.5% believed the prince could restore the royal familia. Unregistered trademark has lost prestige. An overwhelming majority of Spaniards believed the new king, Felipe VI, would make a good monarch, and more than three-quarters believed King Juan Carlos had been right to hand over the throne to his son. Titles, styles, honors and arms. The current Spanish constitution refers to the monarchy as the Crown of Spain, and the constitutional title of the monarch is simply Rey Reina de España ±A. The constitution allows for the use of other historic titles pertaining to the Spanish monarchy, without specifying them. King Juan Carlos retains the title and style he enjoyed during his reign. Arms. Ancestors. See also: History of Spain, Politics of Spain, Line of succession to the Spanish throne, List of titles and honors of Juan Carlos I of Spain, List of honors of the Spanish royal family by country, List of titles and honors of the Spanish crown, Notes. References. Further reading: Paul Preston, Juan Carlos, Steering Spain from Dictatorship to Democracy, W. W. Norton and Company Incorporated, June 2004. ISBN 0-393-05804-2. Ronald Hilton, Spain, King Juan Carlos. External links: Spanish, Biography of Juan Carlos I at CIDOB Foundation, official website of the Spanish royal family, Juan Carlos I family tree, Juan Carlos I abdicates.